You know, Napoleon Bonaparte, he's one of those figures looms so large, but when you really get down to it, how much do we actually know? Beyond like the memes, you know?
Right, it's easy to get stuck on that surface level.
Exactly. And you came to us with a whole stack of research all about his Wikipedia page, wanting to go deeper, and I gotta say, I'm intrigued.
Yeah,
So let's dive right in. What's always struck me about Napoleon is just how quickly he rose to prominence.
it's definitely meteoric, you can't deny that, but I think it's important, crucial really, to understand that you can't separate Napoleon from his Corsican roots.
Okay.
Born in 1769, just a year after the island was ceded to France, he's constantly grappling with these questions of identity and belonging.
Ah, so that's where we need to start then. With Corsica, it's almost like he had something to prove.
Exactly. Imagine young Napoleon
Yeah.
arriving in mainland France, barely speaking any French,
Oh, wow.
facing ridicule for his accent. I mean, this is something that would crush a lot of people, but Napoleon, it fueled his ambition. He mastered the French language, became renowned later for his powerful speeches and his writings. Talk about turning a weakness into a weapon.
That's fascinating, this drive to overcome adversity. Did that play into his early military career as well? Because your research mentions this nickname, Le Petit Caporal, which always made me think that he was, particularly short.
Yeah, it's a common misconception. 5'7" was actually average height for the time.
Yeah.
The nickname, it likely stems from his early rank, his leadership qualities already evident. I mean, Napoleon possessed this innate ability, even from a young age, to really inspire those around him.
So we've got this ambitious young officer, shaped by his Corsican roots, already displaying this like remarkable leadership. And then enter the French Revolution. What a time to be coming of age.
Oh, absolutely. Chaos can be a ladder, as they say. And while others were swept up in all the upheaval, Napoleon, he saw opportunity. And his early victories, the Italian campaigns starting in 1796, they weren't just about military brilliance.
Right.
And he had that in spades, but he was also a master strategist when it came to shaping his public image.
Okay, so he understands the power of perception, even back then.
Absolutely. He established newspapers, controlled the narratives coming out of these campaigns, presented himself as this champion of the revolution, this defender of France, and this savvy use of propaganda. It fueled his popularity and set the stage for his rise.
It's amazing how he navigated those early years, strategy both on and off the battlefield. But then there's the Egyptian expedition, which feels like a whole other chapter. You see a different side of Napoleon here, wouldn't you say?
Oh, the Egyptian expedition, it's fascinating. And not just for what it tells us about his military ambitions, but you get this glimpse into Napoleon's intellectual curiosity. He brought along 167 scientists. Can you believe that?
Wait, 167, what were they doing?
Napoleon envisioned an empire built not just on military might, but on knowledge, on scientific advancement. They were there to study Egypt's ancient ruins, document the flora and fauna, unlock the secrets of its past. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone, for example,
Yeah.
that happened during this expedition.
That's incredible. It's not every day you hear about Napoleon, this patron of the sciences.
Exactly. It challenges our preconceived notions. But, and this is crucial, the Egyptian expedition also reveals these brutal realities of war, even with all these scientific pursuits. The siege of Jaffa, for example, it was horrific.
That's the thing about Napoleon, isn't it? He's full of these contradictions. On one hand, he's championing intellectualism and scientific discovery, and on the other, there's this ruthlessness to his ambition.
And that duality, that's what makes him such a captivating, complex figure.
So we've got this complex figure, man of action, intellect shaped by ambition, and maybe a little bit of ruthlessness, too.
Right.
And this brings us to a pivotal moment, his rise to emperor.
Yeah,
You gotta admit, it's kind of head-scratcher.
it is.
Here's a guy who rode the wave of the French Revolution, a movement about dismantling monarchy, and what does he do? He puts the crown on his own head.
It is one of the great paradoxes of his story, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's something you clearly came here wanting to understand better. Did he betray the revolution's ideals, or was this like a natural progression, for a leader in his position? It's still something that historians debate today. Napoleon himself argued that France, after years of turmoil, it needed stability, a firm hand to guide it. He pointed to his reforms as proof that he was modernizing France, not simply consolidating power, the Napoleonic Code, for example.
The Napoleonic Code. Yeah, that was something you highlighted in your notes. It's one of those things you hear about, but I'll be honest, I don't really know what it entails.
Well, it's significant because it went beyond just, codifying laws. It established principles of equality before the law, freedom of religion, separation of church and state. These are radical ideas at the time, even if their application wasn't always perfect.
So he's leaving his mark on the very fabric of French society. This isn't just about military conquest anymore.
Exactly, and this is where I think Napoleon's complexity really comes into play.
Hmm.
Were these reforms solely about consolidating his own authority?
Right.
Or did he genuinely believe that he was creating a more just and equitable society?
Yeah.
It's likely a bit of both. He was a pragmatist. He recognized that a stable, prosperous France that was essential to his own power.
It's fascinating how intertwined those motivations become. Personal ambition fueling societal change. But of course, we can't talk about Napoleon without addressing, the elephant in the room, the wars. These weren't just skirmishes. These reshaped the map of Europe. Millions of people died. How do we reconcile the reformer, the builder, with the conqueror?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there are no easy answers. Napoleon was very much a product of his time,
Right.
an era where military might, that was the language of power. He believed in French dominance. He saw himself as an heir to the Roman emperors, shaping Europe in his image. He often framed his conquests as, liberating people from these outdated monarchies, spreading the ideals of the French Revolution.
A convenient justification for war, some might say.
Indeed. But to really understand Napoleon, you have to grapple with that tension. The idealism of the revolution clashing with the brutal realities of conquest. He was a master strategist, a brilliant military mind, but his ambition ultimately led to overreach, and that's where his downfall begins.
And what a downfall it was. Exile, escape, final defeat at Waterloo. It's like something out of a Greek tragedy.
Well, his escape from Elba, after just 10 months in exile, that's pretty remarkable in itself. He lands with just a handful of followers, and within weeks, he rallies the French army to his cause once more.
It really speaks to his charisma, his hold over the French people. Even after being defeated, he was still this symbol of French glory.
Precisely. He tapped into something deep within, I think, the French psyche, this yearning for greatness, for dominance on the world stage. But the second act is rarely as successful as the first, right? Waterloo marked the end of his reign, this time for good.
And this time, exile meant the remote island of St. Helena, quite a far cry from the halls of power in Paris.
Oh, absolutely. It was a deliberate choice by the British, a way to ensure he would never again threaten European stability. But even in defeat, Napoleon remained defiant. He cultivated his image, dictated his memoirs, ensuring his story would be told on his terms. He knew the power of narrative, even in defeat.
It's funny, as we've been talking about his life, this one image from your research keeps coming to mind. His coronation in 1804. He wasn't content with just being declared emperor. He has to bring the Pope himself, Pope Pius VII, to Notre Dame for the ceremony. It feels so calculated.
Oh, absolutely.
Like such a power move.
It's such a fascinating insight into how he thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Napoleon understood the importance of symbolism. He wasn't just breaking from the revolution, He was positioning himself as the heir to centuries of tradition, seeking legitimacy by aligning himself with the church, with the grandeur of European monarchy.
But then he takes the crown from the Pope's hands and places it on his own head. It's almost like an act of defiance, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. He was making a statement. My authority, it isn't granted by the church. It comes from me, from the will of the people.
Wow.
This is a man of contradictions, embracing certain aspects of tradition while simultaneously shattering them.
It's such a potent image, capturing his ambition, but also this willingness to break the mold. And it speaks to something we've kind of touched on throughout our whole deep dive, this complex relationship between, power, religion, and the legacy of the French Revolution.
Oh, it's a tension that continues to resonate even today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We see it in debates about secularism, about the role of the church in modern society, even just in the way leaders today, they try to legitimize their authority. It's all connected.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think that Napoleon's actions, his calculated blend of revolution and tradition, are still shaping these conversations. But it wasn't all just these grand gestures, was it? Your research also highlights these practical, lasting reforms he implemented, like the Bank of France, standardized weights and measures, even the baccalaureate exam system, which still exists in France today.
Yeah, his impact was multifaceted. He was a man driven by this vision, a desire to reshape not just the map of Europe, but the very fabric of French society.
Right.
And you see that in the institutions that he built, the systems he put in place. They're still with us.
Yeah, it makes you realize just the sheer scope of his influence. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a builder or a reformer. He really left his mark on the world.
And that brings us to, I think, the heart of the question you came to us with. Was Napoleon ultimately a product of his time, or did he fundamentally shape the course of history?
It's a question I've been kind of turning over and over in my head this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
I mean, he was shaped by the ideals of the revolution, no doubt, but he also harnessed those ideals, molded them to fit his own ambition, and in doing so, he really did change the world, didn't he?
I think so, yeah. He embodied the contradictions of his era, that fervor for change, but also that allure of power, the brilliance of military strategy, but also these devastating costs of war. And that's what makes him such an enduring figure, I think.
Yeah.
Someone who continues to fascinate us, to challenge our assumptions, and just force us to confront the complexities of history.
He's a reminder that there are no easy answers, that these historical figures, they rarely fit neatly into these categories that we create for them, like hero or villain.
Right, exactly. And as we wrap up our deep dive into the life of Napoleon Bonaparte, I hope we've given you not just a deeper understanding of the man himself, but a new framework for thinking about these big, complex figures throughout history.
Because ultimately, it's through understanding the past that we can better navigate the present and maybe even the future.
I think so.
Thank you for listening. If you love history, don't forget to subscribe to History with Bree and Peter. Join us for more fascinating stories from the past. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode.